Okay, test, test. Hello, good afternoon. Can everybody hear me okay? We are going to get started. Thank you for coming. I'm Angela Wolcott. I have the pleasure to facilitate today's meeting and conversation with all of you. So I'll be a moderator. I'm a third-party neutral, so I don't work for the town. I actually don't work for the client in this case. I'm a third party, so I'm here to advocate for process and to make sure that the community has a way to participate. So that's my role. In a moment, you'll hear about others on the project team. But first, we're just going to jump in and tell you a little bit more about the meeting today. It won't magically advance. Okay, so I like to put together guidelines. These are just to keep everybody moving towards the same agenda, towards the same purpose. We want to make sure that we have time to get to everyone, which shouldn't be a problem. We should have plenty of time today. So these guidelines will help me as your facilitator, and I just want to read some of them off. But there's probably a lot of people that would like to speak and make comments today. So the goal is to be collaborative, allow everybody an opportunity to provide feedback. Sharing different ideas, we just want it to be a respectful and collaborative conversation. And then honoring the perspectives of everyone that's here. Actively listen. I know people took time away from busy schedules, from work, so if you need to take a call, please step out. When you're in the room, we just want you to be engaged and listening. Try not to have side conversations. And then we will be back. This isn't the only meeting and discussion, so we're hoping you come back. Having you stay involved helps you stay engaged and understand where we are in the process, so please stay involved for the entirety. And then we have a couple of technical slides that we want to talk through today about the study. And so we'll take some clarifying questions as we go, specific to the study. But at the end, we'll have time for bigger comments, bigger questions. And I'll walk around and I'll help you use the microphone for that section of the meeting. In that section of the meeting, you'll see we'll put up a slide. You'll know that we're there. But the best way for me to get to you is for you to raise your hand, and I'll come over to you. And then one person at a time. That's pretty straightforward. And then last but not least, there will be some topics today that won't be part of our agenda. So there's certain things that are not part of this study. The town has lots of different activities and efforts going on. So we'll put those questions in a parking lot, is what I call those. So just help us by staying focused on the agenda today and staying concise. Any questions about the guidelines? Okay. That's pretty much the most I get to talk, so I like to make sure that everybody's good with those. All right, so here in just a moment, I want to show agenda. Pretty straightforward here as well, but we're going to jump in, do some introductions, and then we're going to talk about the need and the purpose. So why are we doing this study? I feel like that's pretty important, the why. And then we're going to talk more about the capacity of the channel and what the technical team has been busy looking at. And then we also will talk about some of the opportunities and what that means when the study is complete. What are the opportunities that are currently being analyzed? And then environmental. So we have one of our colleagues here to talk about the environmental assessment. And then we'll talk next steps. Last but not least, you can see we want to have a discussion at the end. That's when I'll come around with the microphone. Sound good? Thumbs up, heads nodding, good. All right, excellent. So with that, Jennifer Waters with the town will come up and say a few words. I'll hold on to this. And I think this is actually being streamed too, right? Okay, do you prefer to stand there or do you want this?
Thank you. I'm Jennifer Waters. I'm a civil engineer in Public Works here at the town. I'm the project manager for this scoping project. The name of the project, or the focus of this project, it's a study for potential capacity improvements near the confluence of the Big Thompson and Fall River. The boundaries of the project are the Moraine Bridge on the Fall River, the Ivy Street Bridge on the Big Thompson River, and the US 3436 Bridge downstream on the Big Thompson River. So thank you so much for attending this afternoon. This is being recorded. It will be placed on the town's website hereafter, and it's also being live streamed. We have another meeting like this scheduled on June 12th. The expectation is that we will have narrowed some of the alternatives as we process the feedback from this meeting today. Also, at the end of June, in coordination with Estes Bike to Work Day, there will be a setup at the outdoor festival that is planned for that week. So this project is grant funded by the Colorado Department of Homeland Security and Emergency Management. They are paying 75% of the cost. The town is 25%. The town is paying about $136,000. DHSEM's part is $410,000. This money is funded through FEMA's BRIC. This is Building Resilient Infrastructure in Communities program through in fiscal year 2020 is when this grant was supported, and we were able to obtain it due to the hard work of the grant specialists that we had in Public Works, Christy Crosser, who is here in the audience. So we are grateful to her for bringing us this grant opportunity. At its heart, this grant is a study, and the end product that we will have from our consultant, GEI, is a 30% construction drawing set, which reflects the local alternatives that we're here to talk about today. And this would involve some recreational improvements and other amenities that we will be talking about. The FEMA program BRIC, one of its focus points is nature-based solutions, and that's what we're aiming for here. The project area is very urban, so it's not like we're able to do green spaces. We have buildings and a river and environment. So we are looking at a sort of a stormwater park is one of the sub-elements under nature-based solutions. There will also be a benefit cost analysis as part of the work that our consultant is doing. And with that, we must achieve a benefit cost analysis of 1 or greater in order to successfully seek funding for a construction project in the future. And I want to point out that one of the options that we have is to take no action. After this study, or with guidance from the community, we could take this study and choose not to build. But hopefully we will, and that would fulfill the goal of the scoping project to remove structures from the special flood hazard area. And these structures are mainly located along East Elkhorn on the south side of that street, and they are between the Big Thompson River. And perhaps there's some business owners and property owners here that occupy those structures. Back after the 2013 flood, there were very few there were no floodplain permits that I could find that were issued to any buildings on East Elkhorn because they weren't in the special flood hazard area. And there were no substantial damage analyses that would be required in today's standards when we have another flood like that. So if we can change the capacity on the river there and add the amenities that we're going to show you, then we could perhaps take these structures out of the special flood hazard area in this corridor. With that, I will just welcome everyone here, and I really appreciate our members from our Town Board of Trustees that are here, and the staff from Public Works, Larimer County, and other departments and divisions in the town. So thank you for being here.
Thank you, Jennifer. Okay, in just a moment, I'm going to have everyone else do some introductions up here. I'm hoping everybody signed in, so just if you didn't sign in when you walked in, please sign in on your way out, so sign out. But just sign that sheet. We want to be able to stay in touch with you and send you information, including the meeting summary. We're creating a meeting summary from today. And also any questions we don't get to, that parking lot of items that don't fall in today's agenda will be in that summary. So I just want to be able to stay in touch and reach out to you after today's discussion. There's also some other information back there if you didn't see it. So I'm going to hand the microphone around just to keep this easy for us, gang. And I will start with you, Tom.
Thanks, Angela. Hey, everybody. My name's Tom Smerdell. I'm the project manager for this effort. I'm a fluvial geomorphologist at GEI, which is kind of a mouthful, especially with my last name, but I've spent probably the last 17, 18 years in river science and design, done a lot of projects like this for flood improvements, recreation, habitat, things of that nature. And I'm kind of the professional cat wrangler. I work with all of the disciplines to make sure what we have at the end looks like something that everybody wants. And I'll pass it off to our engineer on the project.
Thanks, Tom. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Michael Skurlock. I'm also with GEI. I am, as Tom said, kind of the river engineer, civil engineer on this project. I'm leading the technical river design aspects of this. I've had a lot of urban waterway interaction experience in my past. So I'm hoping to bring some of that and really help bring something cool to your community. And with that, I'll turn it over to Chris.
Thank you. My name is Chris Pauley. I'm with Galloway and Associates.
Can you hear Chris?
Can you hear me? Nope. How's that? There we go. My name is Chris Pauley. I'm with Galloway and Associates. My role on the project will be utility assessments and property assessments. I'm a civil engineer, and I'm also been doing stormwater planning and floodplain support for the town for about 10 years now.
Hi, everybody. I'm Sarah Skegan-Caird. I'm a senior environmental scientist with GEI Consultants and working on the environmental components of this project. So everything related during the scoping phase to the environmental and historic preservation review process. So supporting Jennifer in that process, getting all the proper paperwork into DHSEM to make sure that the town continues to be compliant and reimbursed for all of the grant funds. I've been working for multiple years across the Front Range on flood-affected communities, primarily in the environmental and ecological components of those projects, and so I'm really looking forward to continuing the work with the town. Thanks so much.
Okay, so Morgan's back in the corner, and she's part of the team too. Hi, Morgan. Thank you. Morgan's taking notes, and Morgan's also with GEI, so thank you for being here. Okay, and then I'm up there on the screen. I'm Angela. I'm a facilitator. I'm with Kearns and West, and we work on a variety of different substantive areas. I have my master's in conflict resolution, and I'm from Colorado. I've been in Estes Park off and on my whole life. So thanks again for having me here to help moderate tonight's discussion. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and jump into the why and talk about the need and the purpose, and that's going to be my friend Michael here.
Angela, thank you. Pretty shocking yet familiar pictures on the screen for all of you guys. You have way more personal stories about these events than I do. I was in Fort Collins in 2013, but you know, your community here is prone to natural disasters, and flooding is obviously one of those. So up on the screen here on the left is the 82 Long Lake flood, and on the right is the 2013 Big Thompson flood. The 2013 event was a greater than 200-year return flood. These are both moving through the downtown corridor, and I would imagine that some of your businesses and properties were affected by these. So the need and purpose of this project, first.
It's hard to hear. Do you want to try this, or do you want to?
Yeah, I'll take that.
Tall like me.
Sure. Can you hear me better if I talk into this? Okay. The need and purpose of this project, first and foremost, is to reduce flooding for your community and improve resiliency and public safety. We would like to avoid situations like this from happening in the future, and we're trying to work together as a technical team to bring solutions to move towards that goal. Our project area is shown here in yellow. Jennifer did a great job of explaining where we're looking, but just to say it again, it's going from Moraine Avenue on the Fall River all the way down to the US 36 bridge, and then on the Big Thompson we're going from basically Ivy Street all the way down to the same area as well. There are 3 rivers here. There's the Fall River, the Big Thompson River, and you have Black Canyon Creek. For our project, we're just going to be looking at the flooding sources of Fall River and the Big Thompson. There's a couple roadway crossings and pedestrian bridges in here. As we move through this, I'm going to really be focused on Riverside Drive and Rockwell Street. But I wanted to acknowledge that there's other crossings in here as well. We think there's roughly 70 or so businesses that are within or next to the floodplain that are affected by these events. I would imagine a lot of you are here, and thank you for being here. It's very important to get your feedback on this process.
I was curious, how many of you own a business or work in a business in the downtown area? Okay. And then how many of you, there's some town employees here. So how many of you that are not town employees are residents? Okay. Thank you. That helps us get a feel for who all is attending. It's about 1/3 businesses for those of you in the front row that can't see behind you.
Thanks, Angela. So the focus of this study is to identify projects that are going to reduce that flooding, improve public safety, improve community resiliency. The way we're going to do that is really decrease the depth of overbank flooding within the town, decrease the frequency where the overbanking does occur, if it still does. We're hoping that this is going to reduce property damage and ultimately make this community a safer place. As Jennifer was saying, we're going to be trying to go after a FEMA BRIC grant for the full implementation of this down the road. Again, that's building resilient infrastructure and communities, and with a real big focus on the nature-based solutions. Our team here, we really try to bring an environmental, natural kind of solutions approach to the projects we do. So bringing nature to the river as kind of a wild space within your community. And we can do this in a way that engages both people and the critters that live within the riparian corridor. And we found that having people within the river as part of the natural habitat of the river environment is a real benefit to the people who engage with it. As Jennifer said as well, there's two big hurdles we need to do for brick. The first of those is get a BCA, or a benefit cost analysis, over 1. We need to make sure that we are reducing the damages caused by flood in a way that offsets the cost of the project. So we'll be working through that. And the other one is we need to make sure this is going to be a permittable project, and Sarah will be discussing that later in this presentation. Okay, so on the screen now is basically the flood footprint that happens at the 100-year storm. If you remember, the 2013 event was roughly about a 200-year storm, so it may have been a little bit bigger of a footprint than this. The yellow, if you can see that, is the flooding from the big Thompson, if an event came down that. The blue, which is kind of hidden in there, is the Fall River. So we're going to be focused on basically these 5 things in this preliminary investigation. One of the ways to get more water into a river channel is to make it deeper or wider. So we're going to be trying that. Number 3 and number 4 are bridge improvements. The bridges in this town pressurize, which means the water gets up to the deck it very early on in the flooding. So it pushes water out into the overbanks soon. So we're going to be looking at how to improve that. And then number 5 is kind of like a future connectivity to other efforts that have been going on in this town for similar flooding purposes. These pictures should look familiar to most of you. One is standing on the left bank looking upstream at Riverside Drive. This is kind of the rapid area of the river right there. When you have these grade drops in the river system, it's an opportunity to basically regrade the channel and pull it back. And this is going to do a couple things for us. Number 1, it's going to allow us to refocus where the capacity increases can be. Number 2, it can help improve fish passage and fish habitat. Number 3, navigation. And then number 4, as I'll talk about with the bridges, this is a really good way to improve the clearance on the bridges and get more water underneath them. Number 2 up on the upper right is kind of looking downstream from the same spot with the pictures. This would be a good area as an example where we'd be looking at widening the channel to increase the flooding capacity there. So number 3 and number 4 are illustrated on this slide. This is the Riverside Drive and Rockwell Street bridges. The clearance on these is pretty small. We have one of our survey crew standing next to Riverside Drive there. And basically, again, when the flood comes up, these bridges push the water out onto the floodplain. So getting more capacity underneath the bridges is very important. The bridges are also a part of these FEMA grants because they're lifelines. So we have the opportunity here to replace the bridges and improve them as ways to get in and out of flood-prone areas and increase basically safety corridors. And then finally, this is Moraine Street. The 2 concrete, basically blockouts there, are designed to decrease flows that go down this channel. And the idea was that in the future, when this project could be completed and the channel could handle additional flooding, we would allow more flow to come down the Fall River instead of spreading out through town. So we're really trying to do a holistic approach here, consider all the work that's been done in the past, and try to look forward to the future planning phases with the ultimate goal in mind to increase capacity. Okay, so here's kind of where we are today. This is kind of the good news slide. These are preliminary model results, so these are very liable to change. But basically, the blue area on the slide is that existing 100-year flood map I showed earlier. And then the yellow now is what it could look like if we implemented some of these changes. So if you have a property right upstream of the confluence that used to be in the flood zone that was blue, and now it's shown as blue, then that means your property will be dry. If you have same thing in like George Hicks Park, facing south, we think we can get all that water back into the channel, and the models are showing a lot of promise to having some really good benefits here. Where the yellow still exists, that doesn't mean that there is no improvement. Pulling the water into the channel means we're decreasing depths over banks, we're decreasing velocities, we're reducing property damages, and we're reducing the frequency where flooding happens. So we're going to take a brief pause there. I know that was kind of a lot, and if you have any questions for me.
Okay, this would just be clarifying questions on the information we just went through. And if you're still thinking and processing, we have a lot of time at the end to have a conversation, and you can make comments. But anybody seeking clarity on some technical information? Okay, I know your name, Christy, right? The grant writer. Here we go.
Former grant writer. So clarification on bridges. Would it be replacing Rockwell and Riverside Bridge?
It's not hard and fast, so we would be doing either one. If we're planning on pursuing excavation under the bridges, the easiest way to do that would be to replace for that reason.
Okay, and I'm going to try to track people's hands. So I saw your hand go up, and I knew Christy's name. I don't know everybody's name. So if you can tell us your first and last name, we're going to try to jot that down in the notes as well. And if you have a business, if you want to tell us the name of your business, that's welcome too.
Todd Plummer. I'm retired. I notice there's flooding shown on West Elkhorn, but your study stops at Moraine Avenue. Isn't that flooding on West Elkhorn from the West Elkhorn double box culvert on Fall River? And why isn't that included?
That's a great question. So the study area was defined in the grant, so that's set for our study. But we're trying to include future actions like opening that up. So we have to make sure that our channel design can handle the increased water for when that project ultimately happens. But yeah, that flooding source is outside of our project area.
Okay, and then Christy. And then I saw your hand go up. I'll go to you next.
Good question, Todd. You, according to FEMA, you work downstream up. Now, the Moraine Avenue Bridge didn't fit that, but Chris, isn't that true? You work downstream up because of potential impacts.
Why didn't the study area go further?
Well, you can only ask for so much money from these people, you guys.
Okay, and I saw, and I cannot remember your name, I'm sorry. Okay, Corey, and then I'll come back to you, sir.
My question has to do with the loop bridge that was widened in all that area. Oh, louder? Really? It sounds really loud to me. Okay, so my question is about the loop bridge that's been changed. Has that helped anything or not? It looks like it's awfully low to many of us.
Okay, so I know we were going to say it's that loop questions were going to go in the parking lot, but it's about the bridge and it's about capacity. So is there any information that the team has on that bridge in particular?
I would recommend that Director Mahoney answer that question.
All right, Director.
Corey, I'd be glad to have a longer conversation with you on that question. The short answer is yes, there is additional capacity created by the replacement of that bridge, and one corner of it is lower and the other three corners are higher, and the width of the bridge is considerably larger. The capacity of the bridge is considerably larger than the previous bridge.
Okay, I'm going to go over here to this gentleman, and then I'll come back to you, sir. I'm going to get extra steps in today.
Was Black Canyon Creek excluded for the same reason? It was just out of the scope? Because Gordon Slack has to spark. The Black Canyon Creek was responsible for the secondary flooding that got this building and I would say the library. And so excluding that seems to be kind of against what you're trying to do.
So another study area question. And I see, Jennifer, you're giving that some thought. Would you like to come back to that? Or I can walk to you, so stay there. Just allowing everybody time to think about some of the questions too.
I love it that folks are looking outside the boundaries of this study and thinking about hydraulically what's happening. But the fact is that this study had to have boundaries because of the amount of money. There has to be a limit. But Public Works is always thinking bigger than that. And we will be looking always for other grants to study these areas and draw them in to solve. It's going to take decades to solve these problems. But this is the limit that we have for this study. This is our start, and we will get to upstream on Fall River, Water Wheel area, and Black Canyon Creek.
Okay, thank you, Jennifer. And again, I know some people know you, but can you tell us your name?
I'm Frank Lancaster, one of the town trustees. This is just a clarification, and I know this what was meant here, but Jennifer, you mentioned that about structures being removed. You meant structures being removed from the floodplain, not structures being torn down. Yes. And I think there were some gasps in the room when you talked about the study and buildings being removed. So I just want to make sure that's clear for anybody. You're not talking about removing structures as in raising them. You're talking about taking them out of the floodplain area.
That is correct.
Yeah, what a great point to clarify. Thank you. Do you want to add to that? But yes, that's correct.
The buildings that are along East Elkhorn on both sides are in the floodway, which was modeled by the Colorado Hazard Mapping Program. This area, known as the Special Flood Hazard Area, which is the whole floodplain, the 100-year floodplain, and includes the floodway, includes all these structures. We want these structures to be around for decades to come by not being in the path of the modeled 100-year flood. So no structures to come out of the land, but to come out of a modeled special flood hazard area.
Okay, excellent questions. So since I'm seeing a little pause and hands popping up, we'll go back to the presentation and we'll go through some additional information. And again, you'll have more time at the end to ask any other questions that come to mind. So now, Tom, I think, were you going to come up and talk for a few minutes? Do you want to use my microphone, this fancy microphone?
Sure. Okay. I like it. I can move around a little bit. All right. I guess to just put a nail in what Frank said too, just to say it really clearly, one way to remove structures from the floodplain is to change the floodplain itself. So like just structures aren't going to move, but we'll reconfigure the floodplain so water no longer flows in that spot, if that makes sense to everybody. But I get kind of the fun part of this presentation. So as part of the benefit cost analysis for the project, they being FEMA are not just looking at the flood conveyance itself, but looking at utility redundancies, lifelines, bridges, things are going to make it safer as a whole. If there's something that happens, power stays on, sewer keeps working, things of that nature. So included in that as well are recreational opportunities. So if we went and actually implemented a design where we changed the configuration of the channel, we'll be digging out quite a lot of material, which will be a little bit disruptive to the areas adjacent to it, like Hicks Park, for instance. Like if we have heavy equipment out there and we are removing rock, we have to then refinish the things that are disturbed, which is a big part of why all of you all are here, is we want feedback of what that looks like. Like Michael and I can talk about it and come up with what we think should be there, but we really want to know what the people of the town want. So part of that, we use the Trail Masters Plan to start putting in alignments where a trail might be and working that into this comprehensive plan that goes into this benefit cost analysis. And all these things are variables that change that number that get us to a 1 or above that then unlocks the funding to build it all out. So it's a little bit of an iterative design. We'll put a bunch of stuff on paper based on feedback from you all. We'll run the costs on all that of what it takes to actually build it. And then we'll run the benefit cost analysis, and that'll give us a number that we can start iterating of like, well, if we have redundancy in trails, does that give us a number increase? We don't really know until we start evaluating all that stuff. So that said, what we have up on the screen are just essentially bullet points of possibilities that will fit really easily into the design, such as trails, or by removing those big whitewater drops, we'll have better fish habitat because we'll have lower velocities where smaller fish or things that aren't trout can actually migrate up and down. There won't be as much depth or velocity in the river, so there'll be more angling opportunities. So we'll create ingress and egress so you can get down safely to the river and get into it. That's part of the river access stuff too, so you can actually get in and play without getting yourself into a hairy situation. And then if there is want from the town, things like tubing or boat access where you could get in and float a reach of it. So once I move beyond this slide, I have 3 more. The first one are ones that are how Michael and I thought they would fit in pretty well to this plan in the area that we have to work and that footprint that you saw earlier. The following 2 is kind of like what would you call it, a smorgasbord? It's a little bit of everything, really just to get the creative juices flowing in your own mind of what is possible. React to it. Do you like it? Do you not? And I'll ask you to please comment. If you're not comfortable commenting, this is at the end. Please write it down. We have comment cards where you can, tell us what you like, tell us what you hate, tell us if you want to see something we didn't show. And I'll also leave a bunch of business cards out because it's like we are the 2 putting these designs together. So we really want to hear from you. So it's not just us in a vacuum putting it back out to you and hoping that it sticks. Like this is your opportunity to really shape how this how it will look. Like we have the hydraulics figured out, but we really want to know how to finish this thing and put it on paper because it's going to go on paper, and that's how we're going to push the process forward essentially. So just an idea of kind of running through the reach, like we can have bridges that cross different points of the channel. We can have easier access, like the stepped stuff up on the upper left. I spoke about angling a little bit, so we can have safer ingress and egress to the river without really deep pools that are going to launch people. by removing those drops, it'll be safer to boat. I'd say probably the funnest times to boat on the river are the times where you can't safely clear the bridges. So by increasing clearance under the bridges and slowing things down, it's a little bit safer to get in the water and play. And then down on the bottom is just an example of what the trail might look like that we're looking on the south bank of the river that is opposite of the river walk along the Big Thompson. And these next, I'm not going to walk through everything. This is a little more Disneyland, but it at least is something for you to react to and see if it's something you would like or not like, or is this say Estes Park, or is this say like, we don't want this in our town. But really just have a look, tell me what you think. I'm going to just show you one more here, and we can go back to these if you want to talk about something specific. And to reiterate again, when this presentation's over, we're not just going to bail. We're going to be here till 6 o'clock or later if you need us. You have all of our contact information, so we're reachable. These are just some more ideas here of like what, you know, if we have to kind of disrupt Hicks Park for a little bit while we get the construction done, like we've got to put something back. We can put it back just the way it is, or we can change it. I mean, it's really the cost is inconsequential. So I'll show you this one, but I'll just leave this up for just conversation. But does anybody have any questions about additional opportunities outside of the actual flood improvements?
Also, to give you a sneak peek, in June when we come back, we'll have more activities around these questions. So you can think about it too. But anything you provide tonight or share tonight gives both Tom and Michael time to work on it a little bit. In June, though, we'll have probably like a couple boards with sticky dots. And so we're hoping to see more people, and you can put your thoughts down at that meeting as well. So this isn't your last chance. I see a hand in the back. And if you'll tell us your name before you ask the question, thank you.
I'm Matt Kay. I own the building across the street and am owner of Sky Pond Architecture and Engineering. Curious if there's been any ideas of putting a road and shops on the far side where we're talking about.
On the south side of the river?
Yeah, south side, yeah.
There's thoughts of a trail. I'm not sure that we can put a road in. I guess a big part of that is that land is under conservation easement. And I think that would be defined under the terms of the conservation easement, which I haven't seen yet, but my gut says that a road's probably a little bit too disruptive for that area. A big part of that too is it's mostly comprised of granitic rock and gneiss, which is like glass hard. So excavation in that area for something as big as like a two-way road would be likely cost prohibitive.
I understand.
But a trail we can cut in.
I understand. That makes sense. All right, little bit more technical question. At the confluence for the flooding, is it optimized to where it looks like you're going wider and I guess before the confluence going deeper, right? And so I guess it's just you're figuring out your full depth where it needs to be and then matching the width for a certain flow rate. Is that how you're figuring that out?
Yeah, so the current thinking, and nothing is really locked in yet. This is kind of we're here to report our first cut to say like this is our best professional judgment of if we do this happens to the flood. So really, I mean, to be honest, going into this, it seemed like widening would really be the solution, but then we got into the geotechnical part of that of like, wow, that's going to be really expensive and disruptive. And really, I think Michael and I both were a little nervous about fracturing all that rock, especially under like a freeze-thaw cycle. So it really, really pointed towards depth. And by removing those drops, we get a pretty natural slope that's about 2.5%, which is on par with a lot of the rivers around here, something a little bit closer to the historic conditions. So it really gentles it out, and then when it really takes that much of the flood, it's like, wow, this is a pretty cool solution. And then the width is kind of more as needed. So like to accommodate a bridge, or if we're going to put a bike path underneath the bridge, we might want a little bit more of a bench so we can widen things out, and the bridge would span the whole thing. I'll get a little closer to the mic too. I realize I'm drifting backwards. So yes, the current approach is essentially width as needed and depth to get us where we need to get.
Thanks for describing the difference there, Tom. That's helpful. There's another hand up back here. Hi, what's your name?
My name is Mark Eigel. I'm a trustee with the town. I wonder if the plan or any part of the plan includes taking or acquiring any private property, any private land on that north side of the river?
Not currently, no. It's not something we want to do at all. I think we may explore that as part of the BCA just to see the sensitivity of the tool. But currently, with the excavation, we're kind of getting where we need to get without any buyouts, essentially.
And the BCA again, can you just remind people? And
Yeah.
is it like a model that you're running?
It's exactly what it is. It's kind of a black box tool where we put a bunch of inputs into it that parameterize our design. And we have Michael Baker, another firm that essentially wrote the book on that. And we're working with them to iterate to see how we can get that number to where we get the funding necessary to continue the study. And if the final landing point or design is a go, the money to then build it. So really, we're working to get sensitivity out of that. We'll probably explore it, but it is not, I mean, based on our findings, it's probably not necessary to even consider it.
Can you comment on the ownership of the land that's being considered in the plan?
It's all town owned.
No bureau, no anything else?
No, there is at the edge or the downstream end on the right bank of the conservation easement, there is some CDOT parcels, which are the only ones that are not owned by the town. So as we get closer to something that resembles a more final plan, we'll engage with them and see what their appetite is for us to do a little bit of widening there if necessary. But it's so far down in the reach, the Highway 36 bridge is likely going to be the hydraulic control down there anyway. So it's not really anticipated that we're going to have to do any work there to get where we need.
Okay, I'm coming over to you. Are you going to ask about recreation or amenities? I'm just curious. Nobody's made that comment yet, so okay. And I would love to hear your name for Morgan back there.
I'm Jenna McGregor. We own the Historic Park Theater and the Park Theater Mall area. So you're actually wrong. Part of the area in which you're looking at, we actually own. But all easements have already been given, so maybe that helps Mark's question. Now do you want me to ask about recreation?
Yes, let's do it.
I would love to. So the recreation aspect of this scares me just a little bit. Two things. The water's really, really cold. And I love tubing, but the water's really, really cold, except for like maybe 2 weeks a year. So I do worry a little bit about that and getting down. Yeah, I worry a lot about getting down to the river area. People will literally climb over our wall and like climb down to the river. And I think it'd be great if there was better access so that they don't do that and so that then also they don't slip into the water. But that's my comments. I think the recreation is phenomenal, and I think it's just what Estes needs to make it fun. But
thanks for that.
Yeah, that's interesting. So there would be some improvements to the way that people are currently accessing it if they're seeking recreation current day. Is that right?
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. And I'm terrible with names. I know you're sitting next to Christy.
Mine's pretty easy because it's right here on my chest, too. Yeah. Okay, this is not speaking as a trustee. However, when you talk about recreation, I've kayaked that every year several times and usually start up around the Dunraven, the old Dunraven, and kayak all the way through and end up in the lake. It's actually a pretty fun run. And my understanding is that Rapid, you were talking about taking some things out, the one by the Dairy Queen was intentionally built as a rapid during urban renewal.
Oh, no kidding.
And I think, right, is that correct? And I think farther up, there was some discussions on the Fall River about a kayak course. And that lower end for some gates, I know Fort Collins just did a kayak park that's very popular. So I'd like to see that as one of the considerations, is not flattening it out for tubing, but maybe even constructing some more rapids in there that could be used as a kayak course for some gates, and we could have some kayak competitions and things here in town. It'd be a wonderful place to sit and watch them. And it reflects back to the bridges too. I've been concerned on some of those. The headspace on those bridges is really tight. And I've got to admit, I've been through them a couple times where I've had to lay down flat in my kayak and cross my fingers. And the thing is like right here.
Oh, boy.
And I have not got stuck yet. But it's a little scary, especially that one, because you have to lie down to go underneath it and then sit up really quickly to go through the rapid and paddle. But looking at that headspace is something. But considering that as kayak courses, I would like to see that as one of the options.
Thanks, Frank.
I have a question that I'm sure Director Mahonen will die because I don't remember, but at 30% design, how close are you to getting to some accurate costs at all?
I might punt this one to Michael. Yeah. He just did the cost estimate, so it's fresh in his brain.
Also, can you remind people where that fits on the continuum? So 30% design, is that happening concurrently with the study? Is that part of the study? Is it after? Can you just remind people that don't know all the technical aspects?
Sure. So part of our task is to come up with a total project cost, and that's going to be the cost denominator on this BCA. So if the cost keeps going up and up, then the benefits, are relatively less. So cost is a consideration. What we're trying to do now is kind of put the bookends on what a cost could be that's meeting all the objectives of this study. So we're not going to be refining something like down to exactly what it's going to be final, but we want to make sure we're hitting, it's a little bit better than order of magnitude. It's kind of like an impact level cost. You bet.
Okay, and then over here we have another question or comment, and if we could get your name too, please.
Hi, my name's Tom Hostetler, 230 Bighorn, semi-retired, at least they want me to be. I have a totally different perspective on this, and just to raise it with you guys. I understand the geology of this. I understand the difference between a CF and a CFM. My problem is the social impact of this. I think the city, on their construction of the loop, has done more damage than all the floods in the past century. And I think that there's a real social break, a harm to the social fabric, and not a buy-in of the public. And I think that that is the biggest issue that you're going to face. The loop was not passed by a vote of the people. It was decided it was in the best interest of the public. And I really fear that at some point one of the merchants is going to set themselves on fire outside the building here in protest, and that's how all revolutions start. And I really worry about the social consequences, not the engineering consequences or the cost benefit. And if you don't understand what I'm saying, then you're not talking to the real merchants out there. A lot of them are really hurting and complaining about, and residents that got their sound ordinance taken away from them because they needed to jackhammer in the middle of the night. Just on and on and on. There's a real distrust of government right now. And rebuilding that, I don't know how you're going to do it, but there seems to be a problem.
My name is Hannah Briney, and part of the family that owns Silver Moon Inn downtown. My question is two-part, one comment, one question. The question goes back to engineering. The engineering study, it appears that it was done for a 100-year flood, but there are several pictures and references to the 2013 flood, which was more than a 200-year flood. Has there been any modeling done on more than a 100-year flood for those businesses specifically that will hopefully be alleviated, because we've had several more than 100-year floods in the past 50 years. Second portion comment is for recreation. Silver Moon Inn in 2005, in front of the river there, by the Economic Development Committee, there was an improvement for the river. Included in that was a kayak run, which has never been used because of bridges. So please consider, with your recreation, whether it will actually be used or usable.
Thanks.
Okay, so I'm just gonna press pause for 1 second, because I wanted to make sure, sir, that we heard your concern and that we're making sure that we are underscoring the concern of the community. And I know that you're a voice here representing that. So just want to make sure that part of what you're describing is the fatigue that the community is feeling. So thank you for voicing that. And then the second question that you just asked about 100-year versus 200-year. So yes. Yeah, it's a good question. And I'll look to the technical team to help answer the difference there.
So I'll take the first of the two and then start the second one and then turn it over to you. So the 100-year is used by FEMA and for floodplain administrators as kind of like a benchmark to evaluate different project alternatives and as like a standard for flooding. So that was decided, not in this room, a long time ago, that was going to be used. It does not represent actual flooding damage that happens at greater flood events and lesser flood events than the 100-year. So absolutely, intense storms are happening, and they're happening more frequently in Colorado. We'll be looking at those. We're also going to be looking at the damage to properties and overbanking and flood issues at flows less than the 100-year. Some of these spots are getting wet at the 5-year events. So it's kind of the whole storm hydrograph analysis. We're looking at kind of the whole picture. So I really appreciate that question. As far as recreational use, that's also a look at the whole picture kind of response. So you have to figure out when runoff happens here, when people are here, what types of recreation people want to be doing, and then we'll try to design the river to really like optimize that. So if people are prioritizing kayaking, there's going to be flows in these rivers that are going to be really good for that. But they may not happen until a 2 or 3 year return storm. So it's analysis we do during the design process. We're going to try to make it the best we can.
It sounds like you're describing some trade-offs there too that you'll be looking at.
Yeah, and there's opportunities for a lot of different wins as well. So we're not necessarily sacrificing one thing for the other, but we might make one recreational opportunity really, really good with an opportunity for kayaking at certain events. And that's the kind of feedback we would love to get from you, because we have a lot of options right now.
Okay, and please tell us your name. And then in a moment, did you have your hand up, or were you? I couldn't tell if you were doing thumbs up or if you had a question. Okay, he technically had his hand up first. So, okay, we'll go to you next.
So Michael, on the BCA analysis, are we not going to be evaluating? You indicated lower than 100-year. We could evaluate higher than 100-year and incorporate that into the BCA analysis also, right? Technically.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely.
So for everybody's understanding, what happens with these BCA analysis is that they show much more benefits when you get more damages at lower return interval events. So the amount of damages that you get at a higher event, a 200-year event, obviously is going to be greater. You're going to get more dollar amounts. They don't occur as often. And so so damages at a 10-year flood event occur much more frequently, and that BCA analysis incorporates that into it. So the analysis will take into account a wide range of events in conjunction with that. It's just that the way the thing works is you get more avoided damages more often with the lower return animal events. It's the way to say that.
Okay, your turn.
My name is Deb Dufty. I am not an elk expert, but it does appear that there, where Kind Coffee is the crossing spot for the elk. It seems to me that in designing that stretch of river, if one were to design what I'm imagining, which is a wider, less velocity, the elk obviously are going somewhere, but if we inadvertently drew them up into that area, it's a funnel. You know, you've got that whole wall of buildings there, and the intermixing between people recreating. It seems like this would be a really great thing to think about ahead of time versus trying to troubleshoot it afterwards.
We couldn't have timed your question any better, because the next portion, Sarah will talk about some of these ideas and things that you're saying, hey, have you thought about this? And please make sure you do. So I would propose we move to the next portion and have Sarah go through some of that information, since those types of questions are coming up. And then we'll have more time. Again, it's only 5:05. So if you were planning to be with us from 4 to 6, we're doing great on time. And if that works for the two of you, we'll go ahead and move to environmental. And you're welcome to comment more on recreation and other things even after the presentation is done.
Yeah, I move my hands too much.
Sounds good.
So we haven't solved that problem yet. So I don't have all the answers. But my name's Sarah. Again, I know it's been a while since we did introductions, so just a little review there. So we want to jump into the environmental review process. We want to share with everybody where we've been, where we're going. This is a stepwise approach in that we take this in bite-sized pieces. So federal funding, because federal funding is required for the project, obviously, we have the National Environmental Policy Act that we need to comply with. So the federal nexus then develops that immediate connection between us and NEPA. So this process needs to walk through that. Again, it's a process that is working through multiple years. So everyone will get a chance to review this process as we work through it. Where we are right now is in the environmental and historical preservation review process. So that's kind of the first step, where we start. In order for the town to continue to secure federal funding, we need to go through the EHP review process. So where we are right now is formulating those documents. We're getting that regulatory process started. And the submission of these documents is really critical for us to move forward. And so where we are in this, we've essentially completed a baseline assessment of resources. This was completed by GEI, by myself, in December. As we know, everything is dormant in December. So we went out there to basically get a baseline assessment, understand what the project area looks like and the extent of the project area and how that would overlap with natural areas, so that we could get an idea of what those resources are that may be adversely impacted as this project progresses. We also completed a Class 1 cultural records review. The cultural process is essentially happens in 3 phases. For those who are not familiar, Class 1 is your baseline assessment of all available information. So all records that are currently on file with the State Historic Preservation Office, those are provided to us. Any that may touch the project area or those that are immediately adjacent. In this case, because we're in an urban environment, we need to consider both the built environment as well as the cultural and archaeological resources that we may be impacting. So our Class 1 records review was essentially to get that initial records review going, understand what's out there, what available resources, and what additional work needs to be done over the long term in order to actually physically construct the project. We have started the agency coordination process. This is again early. We are in the scoping phase right now. And so what the EHP review process requires, which is run through DHSEM and then ultimately through FEMA, we need to start that agency coordination. Agency coordination at this stage in the process requires that we submit, the town in this case, submits agency coordination letters to each of these agencies that are highlighted on the right-hand side of the screen. We send letters out to those agencies and we tell them a little bit about the project, including key items that those agencies may be most concerned with. So we comprise that letter. Jennifer sent those letters out to respective agencies, and now we're in the process of getting that feedback from each respective agency. Some of those agencies at this point in time say, we don't see any issues with this. We don't think that our agency should be concerned with any future phases of this project. So essentially checking that box and saying, please don't include us on future communication. That does occur. Typically, we expect the environmental agencies, those Colorado Parks and Wildlife, U.S. Fish and Wildlife, State Historic Preservation Office, those tend to be the agencies that are a little bit more interested in at least following the process. And so initial feedback has been gathered. We still got to hound those agencies to make sure that we get all of that feedback, because we have to submit all of those agency coordination letters as well as all the responses from agencies with the EHP review that'll be going in this spring. So that'll go into the state agency, and then FEMA will review all of these documents, make sure that we're in compliance with the EHP process. So that's this initial scoping planning phase. So as we complete that, we'll move through that. We're expecting to submit the EHP review to Department of Homeland Security Emergency Management. They are our first state agency that takes that whole package. They will then send key documents up to FEMA, and FEMA has key people who are on the EHP review team. So they will look at all of those documents and then provide us with comments, response to any of the issues that they see associated with the project. So we expect that we'll be submitting, hopefully, the EHP review package this spring. We're thinking probably late May, mid-May, possibly, depends on review. All of those are, it's a pretty dense package. We do have to make sure that we get all of those critical elements in there now so that not only the state agencies, but also these other associated agencies know what we're doing out there and whether or not they're going to be concerned with future phases of the project. So we'll be submitting that package this spring. We do want to field verify conditions out there. As I said, I conducted my surveys in December, and typically we like to do a growing season survey, make sure that we're covering all of our bases, not only aquatic species, but we also want to make sure that we're covering the terrestrial environment that's immediately adjacent to this project. There's a conservation easement in here. We're proposing a potential trail on the south side of the river, which would have the potential to interact further with wildlife. And so we want to make sure that we really consider all of these elements as we move forward in the project. So that summer field survey will essentially feed into later phases of the project. We've covered our bases now with the initial EHP process, and so we expect that that will satisfy this first scoping phase. And then we'll be using these surveys to further support the environmental assessment as we move forward. So for the path forward at this point, the regulatory process As Michael and Tom were alluding to, we're working towards 30% design by the end of 2024. We want to refine those alternatives, and we want to know essentially what we're moving forward with should this project move to construction. The current grant and the current scope that we're working under right now get us through the end of December, early 2025 to wrap up this project, the scoping phase. So essentially what would happen as we move forward with it, should it be moved forward to construction, is that we need to go through the full environmental evaluation, which is the environmental assessment process. That is required per NEPA. It's the next step in the process. The environmental assessment really hones in on the adverse impacts that may be incurred as the result of the project. We hope that any adverse impacts that we identify, such as concerns that might arise from increasing contact with wildlife by putting a trail on the south side, that is a very real adverse impact that we need to consider as part of this project. So not only are we going to be looking at that through this scoping phase, but we're going to bring that forward. CPW has already, Colorado Parks and Wildlife has already been clear in that they want us to consider those types of issues that they have already run into, they're dealing with on an ongoing basis, they're short-staffed, they want us to consider that as part of this design for this project. So as we move into the environmental assessment process, we will be looking and refining some of those things to actually figure out how we're going to minimize any of those adverse impacts that may be incurred as a result of the project. We also know that the Class 3 Cultural Resources Survey is going to be required. We've already had those discussions with SHPO, State Historic Preservation Office, sorry for the acronyms. They have been clear that they do want assessments for both the built environment, so everything that's adjacent to the project area. We will have to assess essentially any cultural, archaeological, anything that hasn't been recorded yet. That includes historic buildings. I'm hoping we don't run into any, but I don't know, that haven't been yet recorded in the National Historic Register. So those types of items will be picked up in the Class 3 survey that will be part of future phases of the project should it move forward. We know a Clean Water Act, Section 404 for dredge and fill. We're going to be working in jurisdictional water, so that will be very clear. We'll be working through the Army Corps of Engineers for acquisition of that 404 permit and having this ongoing agency coordination. It's really important to have that early engagement and to keep them along on the process so that nothing is a surprise when we get to the end, because we don't like surprises. And the public notice process. We just wanted everyone to be clear that these documents, as we move forward, will be available for public viewing. So those will be available for comment, and some of the cultural surveys, those get redacted because that's the way that those work, but they don't want access to all of that information. But we'll make sure that the key environmental documents are all available for public notice and comment. So that's all I have at this stage.
Thank you. Thanks, Sarah. So now it's time for any clarifying questions on the environmental overview that Sarah just walked through.
And one quick thing that I wanted to say, sorry, is that, so we're going to be doing summer surveys, especially focused on that conservation easement area, just to make sure that the terrestrial wildlife is considered. I welcome anecdotal evidence of anything that you all have seen. You live here, I don't. So I really invite that information. It's not that it necessarily causes a huge change in the project, but I do like to have that information. I think it makes all of us better informed for how we ultimately design. So I welcome that.
That's great. Thank you. Okay, let me try. I'm gonna go up over this pony wall and hand this to you. Here you go.
Hi, my name is Andy Ames, and I'm a resident here of Nestis Park, and I do help with, or kind of lead a elk ambassador program here in town. And my hope is that there's no development on that south side of the river. Currently, it's pretty much undisturbed, and I think it's a really important wildlife habitat area. And having a path there will just be inviting conflict with elk and potentially other animals, as well as fragmenting the wildlife habitat there.
Yeah, I hear your concern. Colorado Parks and Wildlife has been pretty straightforward in terms of their expectations for if a trail is proposed and moves forward on that side of the river, closures, signage, restrictions. So that's where CPW is coming from right now in terms of a regulatory agency dealing with these types of conflicts. So I definitely understand that the corridor there is getting limited and it's getting piecemealed. And so there are challenges in dealing with that. There may be management decisions that we can make that split the difference a little bit there. But I do definitely hear your concerns and the limitations really on any corridors that are kind of left for habitat.
Here, Andy, use the microphone.
Yeah, I think especially that area or any area, in the downtown. It's with signage or closing the trail, it doesn't help. So you can, like around Lake Estes, there's tons of signage, but people have, if the trail's there, people are going to use it.
Yeah, we will definitely explore that. I know it's a primary concern and one that we don't want to exacerbate as a result of this project. So I definitely, I hear your concern, and we'll work on that.
Thank you, Andy. I see other hands popping up, so I'm going to go back here and then back over in that corner, then I'll come back. And I thought you were talking about signage for the elk to read. So I was like, well, how does that work? Okay. All right. So over here to you next, sir. Here you go.
Tom or Michael, I wonder if we can go back. When you talked about one of the first slides, there were two. You had the Lawn Lake flood, and then you had a flood in 2013. How would you categorize the Lawn Lake flood? Is that called a 100-year flood? That was a structural failure. Is that, what do you call that? That's my first of three.
A structural failure.
Do you want?
It's not part of the 100-year. We've had 200-year floods. That was enough.
Here you go.
Yeah, I would characterize that as a structural failure. I do not know what the recurrence interval of that flood was. It was obviously catastrophic. So, yeah, did that address your question?
Yeah, I just wonder when you talk about 100-year floods, 200-year floods, how many events have we had in this period that were 100-year floods? Does that flood count statistically in the conversation about how many floods we've had downtown? That seems like a one-time, it happened because it
So because we're being streamed, I'm going to attempt to restate that. But the question again is just, was that sort of a one-off? How common is that? Paraphrasing your question. But statistically, what does that look like when you're looking at the analysis that's being conducted?
So that would be a statistical anomaly, and they would usually remove that from the historical data when they're doing that type of analysis now.
Okay, so I have the order. I'm going up to this corner, and then I'm going to ping pong, come back down to this corner, and then I'll come back to you in just one moment. See how fast I can move. Here we go.
Thank you. I'm Hannah Briney again. Twofold again, just to tag along to that question. 2013 was a 500-year flood, if I'm correct. 200. Okay, sorry. Okay. Second of all, with the elk environmental, just comment. I wanted to reiterate the concern in the fall, not just the summer, during birthing and during bugling. So fall and spring, not just summer.
Understood. Yep, absolutely.
Okay. Thank you. So down here, you're next. I'll be right back. All right, here we go. Thanks for your patience.
I'm Jenna McGregor again. My comment actually involves more trails downtown, because our issue is that being along the Riverwalk area, people come out of shops and they almost get knocked over by bikers and people on moving items right now. And I know we're increasing like bike lanes and things, but it really doesn't stop them from going along along the Riverwalk area. And so I'm a big proponent that we need something else, a different area for those people to be in, because all I see are people on like one like moving ball, like almost everywhere, rolling somewhere in like the downtown corridor, because there's not enough parking. So they have to have some way not to be walking necessarily, but be moving on something movable. And so I'm a big proponent that we need more trails, in my particular opinion.
And more mobility choices. Okay, thank you. All right, your turn, thank you.
I just wanted to clarify something that perhaps all of you already understand, but as we're talking about 100-year floodplain, 200-year floodplain, I used to be a female public affairs officer, and a 100-year floodplain does not mean that you get flooding approximately every 100 years in an area. It means that every year there is a 1% chance that you can have flooding. So a 200-year floodplain would mean probably that you would have a 2% chance of having that. Just so everybody understands that. Because I don't know if everybody understands it, but I just know that that was always a question that we used to get.
Right, I appreciate you saying that. It would probably be helpful when we go out broader to more and more community to have a glossary or define some of this. So thank you. And any other comments on that, team, before I go to the back for a question? Okay. All right, Matt. We spoke on the phone, right, Matt?
I guess this is a high-level question, but my question would be, what's the deliberation process once the study is done to get to construction?
So kind of ultimate timeline, if everything went smooth and perfect, and if everything continued to move forward. Right, what happens after the study, and I think even just funding. Jennifer, can you answer these questions? Okay. Thank you, Jennifer. Director, here you go.
I love all the hard questions. The direct answer to your question, no, it is not an automatic process that once this 30% design is done, we're pedal to the metal, we're going to construction. First and foremost, this project will be very expensive, millions of dollars, probably tens of millions of dollars. That will not happen with local money in Estes Park. There would have to be grant support, grant funding for this project. Our office and the staff working for the town, we do not go after grant applications without having the support of the town board. And so if an opportunity comes up for grant funding, before we could even talk about design, we'd have to get grant funding to do, before we talk about construction, we have to have grant funding for preliminary and final design. The 30% conceptual design is just that. It's a concept about 1/3 of the way developed. And so we'd have to go for grant funding for design, grant funding for construction. Both of those processes would involve public input. There would likely be general fund money, because anytime you ask for grant money, the funding agency typically says the local agency needs to put some skin in the game. Jennifer talked early on, I think you said this was 25% local match money and 75% grant money. So those types of ratios are common when we go after grant funding. So to that point, if we're going to put local money into the project, that requires public input and deliberation, decision making by the town board on the annual budget process.
Okay, all great questions. You know, they're going to be asked frequently, so it's helpful to hear them here tonight. I think we could turn to just a little bit of the schedule for the study and talk about next steps. And then we're still available and we can stay until 6, but this will at least, since we were just discussing what really does happen next. So Tom, do you want to share about next steps, and then we'll go back to everybody else for any other questions?
For sure, thanks. The next steps are just this slide. So Michael and I are going to take this feedback with us and incorporate it into the design. We're going to continue over the next couple of months getting more feedback. So our first step would be roll this all in, and then we engage our sub-consultant, Michael Baker, to start putting this into that benefit cost analysis model to see what the sensitivity is of, like, do we need to add other stuff? Do we need to rope things back? Basically to get that positive value to get the money to continue further iterations of the study. So yeah, we're in May, we're refining the concepts, we're taking in feedback. We hope by July we have a selected alternative. We should have enough information from the public and the benefit cost analysis to say, okay, this is what we're going to go forward with, and develop an actual, like, on paper design that we can share out. That'll also inform the EHP process, which is in motion. That's what Sarah is doing currently. We should hopefully have all that wrapped up in October, which will also have us do one final run on the BCA process, which is what we're going to submit to FEMA for them to review. We'll get a green light. We'll finish the design package to a 30% level, and then we'll go through any reviews that are necessary with the town or the public and turn it in, close out the contract. As part of that, we'll have ongoing meetings. So we're at 5-1 right now. That's us. We'll come back in a little over a month and do this again to get more feedback and share out more of the things that we've learned. So to kind of back up a little bit, this is us saying, hey, we've been poking around at stuff and this is what we've learned, and that's what we're sharing out today. And we also want you to do your homework and really think about what else do you want to see in this or not see in this. We totally hear you. Then 6/28 we'll be out here for Bike Week, engaging kind of more of the public, a little less formal. We'll have more materials to share and get kind of passerbys and kind of quicker interactions essentially, but we'll be available for the whole day. And, oh, that's right, the study session. So in the conclusion of all that, and as we're approaching that 30% design, we'll have a formal study session with the board, I think back here in this room in September. And that's pretty much it. So let's just open it up for more questions and conversation.
And I see, Jennifer, do you want to add to that? I was noticing, so go ahead.
Yes, I wanted to clarify on that schedule. The bike week, actually Wednesday of that week is 6/26, and we are aiming, that is, to be at the event with Bike to Work Day with Estes Cycling. So assuming that 6/26 is the day that we stick with, yes. I have requested from Town Administrator Mahalik a study session in September, either on 9/10 or the second date in September. That has not been confirmed, and that process will work through the town Board of Trustees and Travis to confirm.
Did you notice some of the bike friends in the room that 6/28, it was 6/26, yeah. And that's a statewide bike to work date. So thanks for catching that. Okay, before people are starting to peel off, if you leave, please take a comment card with you if you want. You could even take a picture of it after you fill it out and email it to us. So you don't have to give us all your comments tonight. So if people do need to start trickling out, make sure you take a comment card, put your name down. We'll stay in touch with you. Here you go, another question.
Yes, Todd Plummer again. So I went through your technical document, and in your document you refer to an 8-foot, 10-foot, 12-foot, and 14-foot excavation options. I assumed from going through your document those are feet below the bottom chord of the Riverside Bridge. Is that correct?
That is.
And you don't show the stream bottom, so it's a little difficult to tell how much excavation that actually is, but I think it's between 6 and 8 feet of excavation for the 14-foot model that you prefer in your document. Is that correct?
Yeah. Yep, sounds like it.
And under the Riverside Bridge, there are 2 major sewer lines that are at what I would call the maybe 10 to 12 foot excavation model depth. So you've got talking about multi-million-dollar problems. The sewers there might be in the neighborhood of $10 to $20 million to get them low enough to allow your 14-foot excavation there.
Yeah, it's definitely something we're still working on. Like, we know a lift station is going to probably be way too expensive, so we'll start looking at alternative alignments or redundancy, essentially. But yeah, we can't lower it without issues for sure. We totally hear you on that.
So is an alternative to widen the Riverside Bridge and only do a 2-foot excavation to get down to the highest sewer line and then do a widening there instead of a deepening of the channel?
I mean, I'll let Michael speak to this. I think we still need to deepen it to get the capacity. So just replacing the bridge without excavating the channel creates a problem in itself because of the approaches for the bridge. We just don't have a lot of room to work without kind of getting past what the code allows, essentially. Like, it'd be too steep of an approach, or I guess it creates some problems. I can close it at that. Michael, do you have anything to add to that?
Appreciate the question. And Galloway, who I'm looking at Chris Pauley, is handling the utilities for us. So I'll let him chime in here. But the sewers are one of a few utility conflicts in this project area that we're going to have to be looking at. Those costs are going to be a factor in the overall project costs. Speaking specifically to the sewer, thank you for bringing that up. The 2 sewer lines are basically right at the footers of the existing piers. We cannot excavate that deep without interacting with those. We've looked at alternative alignments, potentially down the south bank, or we're going to have to figure out how to basically get the sewage back up to the other side if we lower them.
So before I go to Chris, if you do want to add anything, I'll be right there. Chris, there's just a couple of side questions about, can you please clarify what bridge you're talking about?
Sure, that's Riverside Drive. No, the new bridge is Ivy Street. So Riverside Drive would be part of this project.
Show you really quick too. It is right. Did I pass it? I did. The bridge right here is Riverside, and it's at essentially the next drop upstream. It's under a whole bunch of rock. It's where it's really steep.
So yeah, it'd be the bridge on the right side of this slide.
All right. This is a little bit of a ramp, so I'm really getting some good exercise here.
Hi, I'm Joni Crockett. And I had some calls today, and a lot of people concerned about the new bridge that's been put in there. They think it's way too low. Is that where you're going to start excavating? Are you going to dig it deeper, or, I mean, you look at it. I mean, we haven't got our runoff yet.
So, yeah,
No?
it's a question that has come up a couple times, and I understand what you're asking, and maybe I'll defer to Jennifer, but Ivy Street is part of the Loop project. It's not going to be a part of this project. Our disturbance limits are going to be basically the downstream face of Ivy. So we're not going to be addressing that.
And I'm looking at Morgan too, so you'll put that in the parking lot. It'll come up. We know people will be asking. And I don't know if I should go to Jennifer or the director, but do either of you have anything to add, since it's two different efforts, two different projects?
I can add a little bit of context to that, in that the grant funding limits are very, very precise. We can't go outside of those. We get into trouble. I've done projects where they got outside of it, and it's a big hassle to try to change those limits and the funding associated with that. That being said, hydraulically, when you open up a channel, it has impacts going upstream. So it doesn't mean that the project area wouldn't necessarily impact water surfaces upstream. So it could. So if for some reason the excavation did extend all the way to the face of Ivy, then there could be some slight increases in capacity at Ivy to some level or degree that we don't have a good handle on right now at this early stage. So that's I forget who it was saying, but starting the project at the downstream end and working its way up, that's why you do that, is because the benefits will project upstream. Benefits don't necessarily project downstream. And then kind of a side comment, because of the questions about Black Hollow flooding and upstream flooding on Fall River, the ability to solve those problems upstream are dependent on solving this problem downstream. So this project is starting at what I always call ground zero. We got to open up the channel, we got to fix the flooding here, and then we can add more water into the system from up above. The project will accommodate that additional water. Michael was talking about that earlier, and so that's why this project downstream comes first, and then it's phased upstream.
Yeah, so a little counterintuitive. So thanks for describing the relationship between those different projects. These are great questions, and we have time. So what else is on your mind? All right, I'm going to pass it through the end of the aisle here.
Hannah Briney again. So it was mentioned that this project is mainly on town land with the exception of a corner owned by CDOT. And then Jenna McGregor mentioned land that would be impacted by her private property as well. If I heard her correctly, Jenna McGregor said that easements have already been issued for her private land. If this is the case, why are easements being issued before the project is green-lighted?
So, thank you. I'm going to come back over here. Here you go.
I think there was a miscommunication in that exchange. There have been no easements granted to the town from Jenna over that piece of property. Correct, to the west.
Okay. There's been a few people, and I know some people like to listen and sort of take it all in. Any questions or comments from some of the folks we have not heard from today? So a comment about when recreational considerations and improvements are being incorporated to think about bike safety, bike locks, bike storage, places to park them. So not just where bikes and bicyclists would ride, but also where would you actually put your bike, where would you store it, how would you keep it from getting stolen. Okay, thank you. Here you go.
This just occurred to me. I understand that your project area starts at the Ivy Street Bridge, and the loop modifications are on the other side of that. But when you're designing this, obviously, whatever design it is, I'm not talking about the water. I'm just thinking about all the stuff we've discussed tonight. Would need to integrate with whatever's happening up there. Who does that? Like, I understand it's not covered by this grant, but how do you make that? How do you make those design decisions?
So the question about the holistic approach, Jennifer?
Yeah, so our consultants, Tom and Michael with GEI, they have been given access to many loop documents, the construction plans, and I'm confident that they are incorporating the new construction into their designs.
And Michael?
The loop and the channel design is incorporating a lot of like the nature-based solution stuff. I think a lot of that's been yet to be constructed, so you can't see it right now. But there's going to be, willows and dogwood and on the banks, and they're attempting to have a pretty natural aesthetic when it's finished. That's our intention as well. So it should be a nice blend between those two projects. That's definitely the goal of what we're doing.
Yeah,
that's correct.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And we don't need to pass the microphone around. We're also happy to turn this off. It just would mean whatever we're streaming, we would end that portion, but we can stay and you can just come up and talk to us directly as well. So it's really up to you. Again, this is your process and your meeting tonight. All right, a question here. Someone that hasn't asked one. Can I get your name, please?
Yeah, Mike Llewellyn. This comment's basically for the Estes Park Cycling Coalition, but yeah, there's no, and it's kind of obvious, but there is no way to ride a bike through town currently. And my understanding is that the bike lanes, a dedicated bike lane was taken out of the Loop project, so there will be no way to get through. So just on behalf of the Cycling Coalition and on the record, just we wholeheartedly support having some kind of a multimodal trail to get through town.
Okay, so another comment about mobility choices and wanting that to be looked at when those considerations are being incorporated. So thank you. I was trying not to put you on the spot as a first responder, but I just can't help myself. Do you have any thoughts or comments based on what you experience in the role as being a first responder? And can we get your name, please?
I'm John Landcamer, Assistant Chief with Estes Valley Fire. One of the considerations that I didn't bring up yet would be visitor safety. We get people from all over the country, so as you look at recreational opportunities, just hearing Frank talk, it's like bringing us some business that maybe we don't want, but I would like to, offer that we be involved with that process. There has been some other improvements where I see kids right down by the river during the time when the runoff is high that I really wish they weren't down there. So I think just being cognizant of those seasonal flows is really important in the design. Runoff is a real thing. If anybody's interested in some anecdotal evidence, we have our Swiftwater training every Tuesday night in June. And a couple of those nights we'll be down in this section just below the confluence doing our training and practicing. So.
Is that internal Swiftwater training or is that open to the public?
It's internal to
cool.
That's great. Thanks for letting me put you on the spot and helpful feedback. So thank you. And there's a hand up behind you. Here you go.
Yeah, I'll piggyback off that. And you don't have to look very far in Boulder to see that people die every year on Boulder Creek, which is not nearly as cold as this one, and not nearly the number of out-of-town visitors. And I also really am concerned about any damage or destruction to the south side. I just think that's a really important wildlife area. It's a conservation easement, and it's one of the few places that isn't that disturbed. So I'd really like to see it stay.
And do you mind telling me your name? Rachel Ames, thank you. One of my questions I asked when I first started working with the team was just, had there been any fatalities? And so I was really surprised that there had not been. So it seems, just that's great news to hear. So thank you for bringing up safety concerns with other communities nearby. Okay, so we'll start right here.
Hi, Tom Hostetler again. We have an interesting community. We're a park, and we have wildlife all around us. The video camera doorbell caught a bobcat outside my daughter's. She has a nasty 4-year-old, so I don't know if it's good or bad, but constant interactions with wildlife up here. Bears in the front yard. Elk won't let us out the door. Mountain lions. We had a guy in a wheelchair at one of our hotels who was going up and trying to feed the bears. And we really rely on the professionalism of the wildlife and game service to really help us out. And they set the parameters. We've been chased on our bikes by elk. We've been pinned down. The school had to call out the police a couple of years ago to get the kids off the school bus because the elk wouldn't let them off. So these are really touchy interactions, and it isn't just a trail. We understand the complexity. We also had to call the fire department to get a kid out from underneath the water wheel. He decided to go tubing down there with his cousins. That was a few years ago. It's a wild place up here and very complex. And we can't just be bureaucratic. We've got to work together to find some solutions.
And just to piggyback on that, I think as a business owner here in town, I think I'd be wildly for more trails, more recreation, but balancing that with the wildlife that is such a part of our community is so important.
Thank you both.
I'm going to comment on that too. There are areas around Estes Park where elk that's their pathway to get across the river and across the street and up the mountain. And that happened this morning. I had to stop. I stopped for them. The construction worker said, no, go on, go on. No, there was a steady stream of elk crossing the river at the same spot they've crossed for years. And we need to be aware of that because that's going to stop. You have to stop traffic. They have the right of way. Sorry, folks, and sorry, visitors, but that's the way it is. And we do have to be aware. And we've had a lot of sightings, and I'm right there on that river of mountain lions. There's just been a lot more wildlife around, and we need to be careful.
These are great stories, very helpful for us to hear firsthand experiences from each of you and what you're seeing and living and experiencing. Okay, and then again, tell me if you want, I can take the microphone away and we can just all chat too. So please, it's up to you again, but I'll hand it to you and then we can decide.
I'm Jenna McGregor. One thing that I think might be getting lost a little bit is that there's a floodplain area in the entire downtown corridor of Estes Park that is devaluing all of our property and making it so that we can't change things, we can't get permits, we can't do particular things that we want to be able to do. And our town is trying to provide something to us that could help change that. And I realize that there's a very difficult balance here between environmental and recreation, but if we don't get this floodplain changed, it's going to change the downtown corridor from being able to progress into the future as far as development goes, as far as us being able to fix our properties, as far as things being able, they'll have to be brought up to new standards and new elevations. And I've watched the corridor at the Moraine Bridge now for 4 years since they changed the Moraine Bridge. And I thought that they were dumb, just so you know. I thought that they were so stupid for changing the Moraine Bridge prior to changing the one up by the water wheel. But I noticed that it does run faster and it does run deeper and it is changing things downstream ahead of upstream. And I just thought, how could that be? But it's truthful that it does do that. So I encourage everybody to keep the picture of this is that we don't want to be stuck with this floodplain in the downtown corridor of Estes Park.
And I can tell you from some of the conversations I've had with GEI and with the town that they're looking for a win-win solution. And so it's helpful to hear the differing perspectives. And the goal would be that, all of that's taken into consideration. I don't know if anybody would like to provide feedback on, do we have a crystal ball? What would that look like in the future? If these improvements were made, what would happen to the current, what was just being described as the current floodplain? So kind of just the big question, and it could be that we don't have a crystal ball. Is that the answer?
I mean, just to stack on to that is to go back to the beginning and have really Michael's portion of the project of like, first and foremost, I mean, even like the title of the capacity improvement study is the fundamental goal of the project, and then everything else is kind of the frosting, and all these comments go into that to build the cake, if you will. But to add to your comment, like the goal is to shrink the floodplain so there are fewer structures in it, and that when there are floods, whatever magnitude, 5-year to 200-year, it's safer everywhere and there's less damage everywhere. So that is the bulk of the study, is like, let's nail that. And everything else is just, if we're going to do this, we've got to redo the adjacent portions of those channels, and we want to know what everyone thinks it should look like and how people interact in it. And, does everything get equal weight? And like, so essentially we get everyone's feedback and then we build this cake. But flooding is the main priority.
Well, I think that's a great way to wrap up today's meeting. So thank you, Tom, for adding that and for bringing us to a close. Unless, Jennifer, would you like to say anything in closing, or can we give everybody 5 minutes back in their evening, and we'll stay, everyone? We will stay here. Do you have anything you'd like to say as people depart? Thank you, everyone, for your participation. Please tell others to come back in June. And then if you have any questions, reach out to us. But I appreciate you being here tonight and allowing us to be here for the conversation and myself to facilitate. So thank you.